Where we left the last video, it was 10 generations post-flood. Terah, who's going to be the father of Abram, but I'm going to shuffle my way through some chapters here in Genesis. I want to tell you the Lot story. And while one can have a lot of fun making name puns, there's actually a significant amount of information that is wrapped around the life story of Abram's nephew. So, okay, Terah was 70, and he had sons. Now, like with Noah, I can't say for sure which of these was oldest. We do know these are not all of Terah's children. But I'm going to say Haran was older than Nahor, and I'm guessing because the Bible tells us Nahor's wife, Milcah, was a daughter of Haran. Haran also dies relatively young, but not before he fathers Lot. Okay, Terah decides to take Abram's wife Sarai, and Lot with him, and he goes west. And they're headed for the coast, basically. He left Nahor behind. They're headed for Canaan. That's what is in modern-day Israel, but Terah stops. He gets to a town called Haran, and that name does seem to be nearly, if not exactly, the name of the son who died before. Terah decides he's staying there. God tells Abram, you need to continue to Canaan. Abram responds. He continues his journey. He is 75 years old at this point, so we know when he left, his father was still alive. And this is something that we see a lot in the New Testament. Much later in the Bible, Jesus will say to his followers, pick up what you're doing, follow me, even if you're leaving family behind. Now, as for our protagonist here, Lot, the Bible just tells us that Lot decides he's going to go with Abram. So now they get where they're going, but Abram and Sarai go down to Egypt because of famine. Abram says, tell everybody you're my sister. That'll just make it easier. And sure enough, the Pharaoh takes Sarai into his house because he didn't know that Sarai was already Abram's wife. And God inflicts plagues on Pharaoh's household, so Pharaoh basically pays Abram to take Sarai and leave. Now, where's Lot? The Bible didn't say that Lot went with them to Egypt, but when they leave, it says, well, Lot decided he's going to go with them. So at some point, he did go to Egypt as well. So now Abram and Lot are back in Canaan, but they each apparently have a pretty large entourage, and their sheep herders are not getting along with each other. Abram says, look, we're related. We should not have conflict. One of us should move. But he leaves the decision up to Lot. Lot decides, okay, I'm going to go east. I'm going to cross the river, go to the Jordan Plains. And he took his entourage with him. I find it interesting that God waits until Lot has left and then tells Abram, look, this land is yours. It's almost like God saying, man, I thought that guy would never stop following you around or something. But I also have to wonder, what if Lot had said, I'm going to stay here. Why don't you go check it out across the river? Would God have granted Abram what is now Jordan instead of what is now Israel? I guess we'll never know. But in this area, somewhere around the Dead Sea area, there's all kinds of regional conflicts. And it seems that each leader is called a king. I think it's more like the governor in The Walking Dead or something like that. And so the kings in the area where Lot has moved to are constantly besieged by other kings. And one of these others scoops up Lot, his family, all his wealth, and takes off with them. So when Abram finds out about this, he assembles a force of armed men, and he rescues Lot. Now there's another king that just appears in the story after Abram's successful raid. And I'm just going to note he's introduced like this. Then Melchizedek. Now who he is, where he was during the conflict, what his title is, everything leads me to want to know more about who is Melchizedek. But that's a tangent that will need a video of its own, so I'm going to skip ahead. And in this part that I'm skipping over, God says to Abram, your name is now Abraham, and Sarai's name now becomes Sarah. Abraham and Sarah receive 3 visitors. And I mistakenly thought when I first read this that they were all meant to be God. There's this idea of God in 3 persons. I said, oh, it's all the way back here in Genesis, but it's very clearly that one of them is God. And I think this is the first time in at least thousands of years that we're seeing God in human form, the first possibly being in the Garden of Eden. So that's interesting in and of itself, but the other two are clearly angels. So they have a conversation. They all start walking towards Sodom. That's where Lot is now staying. The angels go ahead, and God has a little soliloquy. Should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? And so when God says they're planning to head there and destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, there's this great exchange that happens. Abraham is basically pleading with God to spare Lot's life, even though he isn't mentioned by name. So Abraham says, God, look, if there's at least 50 righteous people, you're not going to destroy them just because of all the wicked people, right? And God says no, and then Abraham keeps pushing. Oh, about 45, 40, 30, no, 20, 10. Abraham stops at 10. And God says, look, I'm not going to destroy the town for 10 people. And then God goes on his way. So the angels arrive first in the town of Sodom. Lot's in the town square. He says, hey, come to my house. You shouldn't stay here in the town square. And sure enough, a large band of men arrive and ask Lot, hey, where did those two men go? And the Bible doesn't really mince words here. The men say, we want to have sex with these two men that just came along. So Lot tries to reason with them, and when that doesn't seem to work, he says, hey, I got two daughters here who have never known a man. But the gang takes offense, and then they are going to break down the door to Lot's house. The angels respond by striking them all with blindness. So during the night, Lot goes to try and rescue sons-in-law. Apparently they're only engaged to his daughters, and maybe he didn't mention how just a few hours before he tried to hand the daughters over to the rape gang. I don't know. But the sons-in-law don't go with him. And by daybreak, the angels tell Lot, hey, it's time to go, now or never, come on. And so only 4 people leave the town in time before it says God rains sulfur and fire and utterly destroys them. But Lot's wife, it says, looks back and becomes a pillar of salt. So only 3 people end up surviving the destruction, Lot and these 2 daughters. And Abraham had asked God to spare Lot, and Lot, when they were fleeing, asked the angels, well, could we go to this other town, Zoar? So that may apparently have saved that town from destruction as well. We don't know how long Lot and his daughters stay there, but we know it's not long. They end up living in a mountain cave nearby, and the daughters, I mean, if it seemed strange before the way Lot was offering them to the gang, well, they decide that for whatever reason they're never going to meet another man. So dear old dad has to get drunk, and the daughters take turns getting pregnant. Supposedly Lot didn't even know what happened. And those 2 grandsons become the ancestors of the Moabites and the Ammonites. And that is as much as the Bible tells us about Lot.